When we talk about hypertrophy or muscle growth, most people immediately think about heavy weights, progressive overload, and just smashing sets until they can't move. That's definitely important, but there's another key factor that plays a surprisingly powerful role: metabolic stress. This is that burning sensation you feel in your muscles, the pump that makes your skin feel like it's about to split. It's not just pain, it's biology working in your favor. So what exactly is metabolic stress? In simple terms, it's the buildup of metabolites, things like lactate, hydrogen ions, and inorganic phosphates that occur when your muscles contract repeatedly under challenging conditions. This stress signals the body that something extreme is happening, and the muscle adapts by getting bigger and stronger. The cool thing is, you don't need massive loads to achieve metabolic stress. In fact, lighter weights with higher reps, short rest periods, and techniques like drop sets or supersets can really crank it up. This is why sometimes, after a brutal set of high-rep leg presses, your quads feel just as destroyed as if you'd done heavy squats. Now, here's the nuance. Metabolic stress isn't magic. On its own, it won't build maximum muscle. It works best alongside mechanical tension and sufficient training volume. Think of it like a multiplier. The tension provides the main growth signal, while metabolic stress enhances and amplifies that signal by creating a strong anabolic environment inside the muscle cell. Finally, it's worth pointing out that there's a sweet spot. Too little stress and the muscle doesn't get the message. Too much stress, like endless high-rep junk volume, and you'll just burn out without much extra growth. The goal is to combine smart programming, progressive overload, and strategic metabolic stress to maximize hypertrophy. So next time you're grinding through those high-rep sets, remember, that deep burn isn't just suffering, it's part of the recipe for growth. When we talk about metabolic stress, we're really just talking about the stuff that builds up in your muscles when you train hard. Imagine you're doing a set of curls or leg presses, and you're pushing past that comfortable point where it stops feeling like work and starts feeling like punishment. That deep burn, that tight pump, that almost desperate feeling of please let this set end, that's metabolic stress. But here's the key. It's not just discomfort, it's biology. Your muscles are basically drowning in metabolites, things like lactate, hydrogen ions, phosphate, and other byproducts of energy production. The harder and longer your muscles contract, especially under conditions where oxygen can't keep up with demand, the more these metabolites accumulate. Now, why does this matter for hypertrophy? Muscles don't just grow because you decide you want them to. They grow because your body senses a threat, an overload, or some stress that it's not quite ready for, and it adapts by adding more muscle tissue to handle the challenge next time. Mechanical tension, the heavy lifting side of the equation, is the most obvious driver. You load up a barbell, your muscles strain under the weight, and that signals, hey, we better beef up so this doesn't crush us again. But metabolic stress is like an additional amplifier. When metabolites build up, they create what scientists call a hypoxic acidic environment inside the muscle. That environment leads to swelling of the muscle cells, recruitment of more muscle fibers, and a cascade of anabolic signals. Think about the pump for a second. You've probably felt it during a set of high-rep bench presses or bicep curls. Your skin stretches, the muscle feels rock hard, and it almost feels like it's going to explode. That cell swelling is a physical signal to your body that damage might be on the horizon. The body doesn't like cells being stretched to their limit, so it responds by strengthening the cell's structural components. One way it does that is by laying down more muscle protein, essentially growing the muscle. The pump isn't just vanity or a fun side effect. It's part of the biological story of growth. Now, another piece of this puzzle is fiber recruitment. When you're working at a lighter weight, your body typically recruits the smaller, slow-twitch fibers first. But as fatigue builds and metabolites accumulate, the body has no choice but to call in reinforcements, the larger, fast-twitch fibers. These are the fibers with the most growth potential. So even though you might be curling with a modest weight, by the end of a brutal 20-rep set, you've recruited just as many, if not more, growth-prone fibers as you would have with a heavier set of 6. Metabolic stress acts like a backdoor to recruiting fibers you wouldn't normally get with lighter loads. There's also hormonal and molecular stuff happening. Lactate buildup, for example, has been shown to increase growth hormone levels post-training. While the direct effect of growth hormone on muscle hypertrophy isn't as magical as old bodybuilding magazines claimed, it's part of a larger anabolic environment that supports recovery and growth. On top of that, metabolites can increase local production of signaling molecules like IGF-1 inside the muscle, which further promote protein synthesis. So you've got this whole cocktail of biochemical signals being stirred up when metabolic stress is high. Here's a practical example. Imagine you're training chest. You do a few heavy sets of 6 to 8 reps on the bench press. That's mostly mechanical tension. Then you drop the weight down and do a set of 20 reps, fighting through that crazy burn, pumping blood into the pecs until they feel like they're tearing through your shirt. What you've done is layered metabolic stress on top of mechanical tension. You've got both primary drivers of growth working together. That's why you'll often see the best results when training combines both heavy, lower rep work and header rep, metabolically demanding work. But let's be clear, metabolic stress isn't some magic fairy dust. You can't just chase the pump with endless sets of light curls and expect to grow like crazy. If all you do is metabolic stress without enough tension, you'll get some growth, but you won't maximize it. It's like trying to build a house by painting the walls but never laying the bricks. The bricks, the heavy lifting, the tension are essential. The metabolic stress is like the finishing work that makes the house stronger and more resilient. The real magic is in the combination. So, when people say no pain, no gain, they're accidentally stumbling onto a bit of truth. That burning sensation in your quads during a high rep set of squats isn't just pain. It's a signal. Your body interprets that signal as a need to adapt, and the adaptation is more muscle. That's why sometimes the toughest sets, the ones that make you question your life choices, are the ones that drive the most growth. The takeaway is simple. Metabolic stress is the buildup of byproducts in your muscle during hard training, and it sends a powerful signal for hypertrophy. It works by swelling cells, recruiting more fibers, and triggering anabolic signaling pathways. It's not the only factor, but when paired with mechanical tension, it becomes a potent driver of muscle growth. So the next time your muscles are on fire during a set, don't just think of it as suffering, think of it as part of the growth process. That burn isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of new muscle. When we talk about hypertrophy, there's always this temptation to grab onto one shiny concept and crown it the king of muscle growth. People say, oh, it's all about the pump, or no, only heavyweights matter, or volume is the only thing that counts. The truth is, less sexy, but way more powerful. Muscle growth happens best when all the big drivers are working together. Metabolic stress by itself is decent, but it's not going to build you the physique of your dreams unless you marry it with mechanical tension and proper training volume. Think of it like building a solid meal. Protein is the star, sure, but without carbs and fats, you're not getting a complete, satisfying dish. Mechanical tension is the backbone. When you load up a barbell, a dumbbell, or even a machine and force your muscles to contract against that resistance, the actual muscle fibers feel that strain. It's a cellular level. Little sensors inside the muscle are detecting the mechanical load, and they send a signal to start building more contractile proteins, actin and myosin, the real stuff of muscle growth. Without mechanical tension, there's no fundamental reason for your body to invest resources in building more muscle. You could chase a pump all day with baby weights, but if there's no serious tension, the adaptation is minimal. Now, add metabolic stress to the equation. Remember all those metabolites building up, the cell swelling, the fiber recruitment that comes when fatigue sets in. That stuff adds an extra layer of signaling. Alone, it's okay, but combined with tension, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Your muscles aren't just getting the lift heavy message, they're also getting the we're under siege message. That 1-2 punch is incredibly powerful. Then there's volume, the total amount of work you do. Volume ensures that you're giving your muscles enough exposure to both tension and stress. If you just do one heavy set, yes, you got tension, but not enough total work to maximize adaptation. If you just do one high rep burnout set, yes, you got stress, but again, not enough stimulus. Multiple sets performed consistently let you accumulate enough of both signals for your muscles to actually grow. So the sweet spot is where volume, tension, and metabolic stress intersect. Here's a way to think about it. Imagine muscle growth as a stool with 3 legs. One leg is mechanical tension. One leg is volume. The third is metabolic stress. If one of those legs is missing, the stool can stand for a bit, but it's wobbly, unstable, and eventually it tips over. With all 3 legs in place, the stool is solid and can hold weight. That's your hypertrophy foundation. take a practical example, squats. Heavy squats in the 5-8 rep range load your muscles with massive tension. Great. Then you add in some sets of leg presses or walking lunges in the 12-20 rep range. Those bring metabolic stress into play. The pump, the burn, the cell swelling. Put those together, and now your quads have had both kinds of stimulation with enough total sets to count as high volume. That's a complete recipe for growth. Contrast that with just doing endless bodyweight squats to chase a pump. You'll get some burn, maybe even some growth at first if you're a beginner, but you'll hit a wall quickly because the tension isn't high enough. Or on the flip side, imagine just doing one super heavy set of 3 reps on squats and calling it a day. Tons of tension, but not enough stress or volume to really make your legs adapt. It's the combination that works. Another way to see this is in bodybuilding programming. Look at almost any successful plan for hypertrophy. You'll notice a blend of heavy compound lifts and higher rep accessory work. There's a reason people bench heavy early in the workout, then follow up with dumbbell presses, flies, or push-ups to failure. The heavy work gives the tension, the higher rep finishers give the stress, and the whole session accumulates enough volume to tip the scales toward growth. That's not random, that's science playing out in the gym. It's also worth remembering that there's such a thing as diminishing returns. If you chase only one variable, say more volume, and ignore the others, eventually you just bury yourself in fatigue without much more muscle gain. Same thing with metabolic stress. If you just do crazy burnout circuits for an hour, you'll get exhausted, but your growth will plateau. The human body doesn't care about how much you suffer. It cares about the quality and combination of the signals it receives. Growth happens best when tension, stress, and volume are balanced and strategically applied. So the key insight is this. Metabolic stress is not the main character of hypertrophy. It's the supporting actor that makes the story complete. Mechanical tension is the plot. Volume is the length of the story. And metabolic stress is the dramatic flair that makes it hit harder. Without it, the story is bland. With too much of it, the story gets messy. But when you weave it in with the others, you've got a powerful, well-rounded narrative that results in real, lasting muscle growth. The big mistake is chasing just one variable. Lifters who only focus on heavy singles and doubles miss out on the stress and volume needed for hypertrophy. Lifters who only chase the pump miss out on the foundational role of tension. And lifters who only crank up volume without planning recovery dig themselves into a hole. The smart play is using metabolic stress as an amplifier, not a replacement. You want the muscle burning, sure, but you also want it straining under load and exposed to enough sets and reps to accumulate growth signals. That's how the 3 come together to drive hypertrophy. So next time you're designing your training, don't ask, should I train heavy or for the pump? Ask, how do I combine these in a way that gives me enough tension, enough stress, and enough total work? That's the recipe for growth. The real answer is not either or, it's both and. That's the science of hypertrophy. When people hear about metabolic stress, the first question they usually have is, okay, how do I actually get it in my training? That's a great question because metabolic stress doesn't just show up magically. It's not like mechanical tension where you just slap heavy weight on the bar and boom, you've got it. Metabolic stress requires some specific conditions, mainly the way you structure your sets, your reps, and your rest. If you want to get that burning, swelling, growth-promoting environment inside the muscle, you need to train in ways that encourage metabolite buildup. The first and most straightforward method is using lighter weights with higher reps. Think about doing a set of 15, 20, maybe even 30 reps where the muscle just doesn't get much of a break between contractions. The longer the set goes, the more metabolites accumulate and the more metabolic stress you generate. Compare that to a set of 3 heavy reps. Yes, the tension is through the roof, but it's over too fast for any meaningful stress to build up. That's why you can squat a heavy triple and not really feel the same burn you do when you grind through a set of 20 walking lunges. Different tools, different effects. Another tool is shortening rest periods. If you take 3 to 5 minutes of rest between every set, that gives your body plenty of time to flush out the metabolites and restore oxygen levels in the muscle. That's great for strength training, but terrible for maximizing metabolic stress. If you keep your rest short, say 30 to 90 seconds, you start your next set before the muscle has fully recovered. That incomplete recovery means metabolites from the previous set are still hanging around, and the next set just stacks more on top. By the end of a few back-to-back sets, you've created an environment of high stress inside the muscle, and the pump is unreal. Then there are intensity techniques, the kind of strategies bodybuilders love because they make you feel like your muscles are being set on fire. Drop sets, for example. You take a set to failure, immediately strip off some weight, and keep going without rest. Every time you drop the weight, the muscle is already saturated with metabolites, and you just pile more on top. Supersets are another one. Pair two exercises back to back, like bicep curls followed immediately by hammer curls. Your arms don't get a break, and the metabolic stress shoots through the roof. Rest pause sets, giant sets, blood flow restriction training. They're all different ways of squeezing more stress out of the muscle. Now, you don't need to do all of these in every workout. In fact, if you try, you'll just bury yourself in fatigue and probably not recover well. The point is that there are many tools available to increase stress, and you can sprinkle them into your programming in smart ways. For example, maybe your main lift of the day is heavy bench press in the 6-10 rep range with full rest for tension, but then you finish with dumbbell presses for sets of 15-20, short rest, and maybe a drop set at the end. You've just combined the best of both worlds, tension and stress. A key part of this is also understanding the role of muscle fiber recruitment. When you start a set with lighter weight, your body recruits the smaller, endurance-oriented muscle fibers first. But as those fatigue and metabolic stress builds, your body has to bring in the bigger, growth-prone fibers to keep the set going. That's why high-rep, metabolically challenging sets can still build a ton of muscle, even with lighter loads. They force the body to use the fibers that normally wouldn't get tapped until you lift heavy. It's like tricking your muscles into giving up their secret stash of growth potential. Let's use an example. Say you're doing leg extensions. If you go heavy for 8 reps, you'll get tension, sure, but the set is over quickly and you don't feel much of a burn. Now try 20-25 reps with a weight that makes you want to cry by the end. Your quads are on fire, they're swelling up, and the last few reps feel like your knees are about to explode. That's metabolic stress in action. You've recruited fibers that would have been asleep during the heavier set, and you've created a biochemical environment inside the muscle that screams, adapt or die. That's hypertrophy fuel. But here's the catch. You don't want to chase stress endlessly. There's a fine line between effective stress and just beating yourself into the ground. If every single set is a drop set to failure with 30-second rests, you'll dig a recovery hole you can't climb out of. Remember, muscle grows during recovery, not just during training. So the idea is to strategically apply metabolic stress, use it to finish a workout, to target stubborn muscles, or to add variety and intensity when needed. Think of it as a spice, not the whole meal. Too little, and you're missing flavor. Too much, and you ruin the dish. The bottom line is that metabolic stress can be manipulated through training style. Lighter weights with higher reps, shorter rests, and intensity techniques like drop sets or supersets. These methods crank up the burn, force more fiber recruitment, and create the conditions for growth. But the real magic happens when you layer them on top of the foundation of heavy, tension-focused work. You don't replace the basics, you enhance them. That's how you maximize the role of metabolic stress in hypertrophy. One of the most misunderstood aspects of training for hypertrophy is the idea of balance. It's so tempting to think, if a little is good, then more must be better. That's how people end up with programs that are nothing but endless high-rep sets, giant supersets, circuits that last forever, and then they wonder why they're exhausted, sore for days, but not really growing. The truth is, metabolic stress is powerful, but like any good tool, it has to be used in the right dose. Too little, and you don't get enough of a stimulus to matter. Too much, and you just end up digging a hole of fatigue that your body can't crawl out of. Hypertrophy thrives in the sweet spot, and finding that balance is what separates smart training from junk volume. Let's start with the problem of too little metabolic stress. Imagine doing your entire program with only heavy singles and doubles, always resting 5 minutes between sets, never letting yourself feel any kind of burn or pump. Sure, you'll get mechanical tension, and yes, that's the most fundamental driver of growth. But without some metabolic stress, you're missing out on an entire category of hypertrophy signaling. Those metabolites, that cell swelling, that fatigue-driven fiber recruitment, they're not happening. You might grow a bit, especially if you're a beginner, but you're leaving gains on the table. Your muscles aren't getting the full message to adapt. Now swing to the other extreme, too much stress. Let's say you decide to turn every workout into a giant boot camp session. You're doing supersets for every exercise, you're resting 20 seconds, you're throwing in drop sets on top of drop sets, and by the end, you're lying on the floor gasping for air. Congratulations, you've generated metabolic stress through the roof. But here's the problem, your recovery is tanked. The muscle isn't just stressed, it's obliterated, and the fatigue is spilling over into your nervous system, your joints, even your motivation. In that state, your body isn't prioritizing growth, it's prioritizing survival. Instead of laying down more muscle tissue, it's just trying to restore basic function. That's not the recipe for hypertrophy, that's the recipe for burnout. The key is to realize that muscles grow best when stress is applied strategically. You want enough to trigger growth signals, but not so much that you can't recover and repeat the process. Remember, hypertrophy isn't about one magical workout. It's about stringing together weeks and months of effective training. If you crush yourself so badly with stress that you need a week to recover, you've lost valuable training opportunities. A slightly smaller dose of stress applied consistently beats one massive dose followed by collapse. Think of it like sun exposure. A little bit of sun stimulates vitamin D production and can even tan your skin. Too little, and you stay pale and miss out on the benefits. Too much, and you're sunburned, peeling and avoiding the outdoors for days. Muscle stress works the same way. It's all about the right dose at the right time. So how do you find that sweet spot? It comes down to programming and listening to your body. For most people, adding metabolic stress as a finisher works beautifully. You do your heavy, tension-based work first, say bench presses in the 6-10 rep range with longer rests. That's your foundation. Then you tack on 1 or 2 sets of higher rep work, shorter rests, maybe a drop set, enough to get that burn, enough to swell the muscle, but not so much that it wrecks the rest of your session or week. The finisher approach sprinkles metabolic stress in exactly where it's needed on top of a base of solid mechanical tension. Another guideline is to apply more stress to muscles that are stubborn or lagging, say your quads just don't grow the way your hamstrings do. Adding a few metabolically stressful sets of leg extensions after your main quad work might tip the scales. On the flip side, if your chest already grows easily, you don't need to hammer it with 15 different pump techniques. Balance again, train smart, not just hard. There's also a recovery feedback loop to pay attention to. If you notice that your performance is dropping workout to workout, that your pumps are actually getting worse, or that you feel chronically sore and drained, that's a sign you've tipped into too much stress. Backing off a bit, increasing rest times, or reducing the number of high rep sets can bring you back into the sweet spot. On the other hand, if you're never getting a pump, never feeling that burn, and your muscles feel flat even after training, that's probably a sign you're on the too little stress side of the spectrum. Adjust accordingly. What makes this so interesting is that the right amount of stress is very individual. Beginners often don't need a ton. They can grow just from basic tension in moderate volume. Intermediates and advanced lifters who have already adapted to tension may benefit more from layering in strategic metabolic stress. Even then, it depends on recovery ability, nutrition, sleep, and overall lifestyle. Someone who's eating plenty, sleeping well, and managing stress can tolerate and benefit from more metabolic stress. Someone who's underslept, underfed, and stressed out by life probably can't. The muscle doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of the whole system. At the end of the day, the principle is simple. Metabolic stress works best in balance. Too little, and you miss out on growth signals. Too much, and you drown in fatigue without building more muscle. The middle ground, where stress amplifies tension, where you get the pump without wrecking recovery, is the place to live. That's where hypertrophy happens reliably, consistently, and sustainably. So when you're programming your training, don't think of metabolic stress as something to maximize blindly. Think of it as something to optimize. A dash of burn, a pump at the end, a carefully placed drop set. These are tools to make good training great. Chase balance, not extremes. That's how you grow muscle without burning out.